What's up, you guys? Average Joe on Money here, and I've got a guest with me. This is my wife, Laura. My not so average. My wife, Laura, and what we wanted to do in this video is we wanted to kind of go into a little bit more detail regarding what happened for us here in late 2018 on Christmas Day, Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, with our dog, Rusty. If you followed me at all on social media, you'll see that our dog, Rusty, a golden retriever, we had to put him down on Christmas morning. And
which also happened to be his birthday.
Which was his birthday. He was exactly 7 years old. So I just wanted to go into a little bit more detail about what happened and really kind of focus in on the fact that we had an emergency fund, that we used it, and why I think it was a big benefit for us. So we'll start with Christmas Eve morning. We woke up and Rusty, he's been known for eating things and swallowing things, but never had any major issues. He was not in our room that morning. He'd thrown up a little bit in our living room. And I was a little bit concerned because we knew he might have swallowed something, but we didn't think much of it until later that evening when we came home from Christmas Eve church services, and there was a ton of throw up in our living room, and we were really concerned.
Welcome.
Can you picture it?
For that visual, painted a nice picture for you.
And there was a ton of throw up, and we were really concerned, but we were a little bit conflicted because we really wanted to take him to our normal vet, but we also knew that it being Christmas Eve, it was probably going to be at least 36 hours before we were going to get him in to see his normal vet. And so I was a little bit conflicted until the real certainty that for me was that I put him outside to use the bathroom, and he was just sitting in the grass, which was very much unlike him. I tried to get him to get up and go on a walk, and he wouldn't even get up, wouldn't wag his tail, which is all you have to do is say walk to him normally, and he would run up, wag his tail, and not leave you alone until he got on a walk. So we made a decision to take him to the local animal hospital. We were telling our kids that evening before we put him down, before we put them down to bed, that we're going to take Rusty to the animal hospital, and we not thinking that it was going to be something where he didn't come home, but that we should pray for him, and we were really concerned about him. So I took him to the animal hospital. On the one hand, thinking it's probably not going to be that big of a deal. There's not going to be anything in there that's blocked up. But in the back of my head, I had this sinking feeling all evening that this time was a little bit different. So I did some x-rays, and anybody who's had an experience at the local animal hospital knows that just to get in the door and have him seen, it was $150. And then from there we took x-rays, and even then I was thinking, well, they're going to do x-rays, they're probably not going to find anything, but they did. So the x-rays showed that he had a ball. It was pretty obviously a ball in his intestines. Not sure if it was blocking at the time or not, but it was definitely there. And something else in his stomach that we, for the life of us, could not figure out what it was until after the fact. And we were really left with this big decision to make, because they were quoting us with the surgery, which they were positive was going to be required. Everything out the door, they were estimating around, was it $4,200? Yeah. $4,300, which is kind of a big blow to anybody who's the average Joe, right? Who's dealing with trying to save money and trying to budget. And I think one of the things that gave us a little bit of clarity was, not that it made any decision easier or harder, but we had the cash in the bank. We had the ability to say we're not going to, whether we want to go into debt or not that's not the factor here. We have the money. It's, do we want to make this decision and go forward? Because we could literally see the money leaving our bank account by doing this. And because we couldn't live with the alternative, which was to say we don't know what's going to happen, so we're just going to put him down, that was not an option for us. So we decided to go ahead with the surgery, which was tough to stomach. I remember thinking, I don't know what we compared it to. Something like, this is a really expensive Christmas for Rusty, or something like that.
Just the vacation that you could take with that money.
We definitely said that a few times. So that was came home at 11:30. And I remember thinking they're going to call us around 1, so I'm just going to stay up. I need to have some, not closure, but I need to have some update before I went to bed as to what was going to happen. And I remember Laura was just about ready to go to bed, and I got a call at 1:15, and the vet who had seen Rusty earlier said, so this has kind of become a worst case scenario. They had opened him up to do the surgery, and they had found that his intestines had a big fat hole in them. And the stuff that's normally supposed to stay in the intestines was all throughout his body. And it became very much a worst case scenario where it was not looking at $4,000, $5,000. It was looking at least, with all the hospitalizations, the ongoing care he was going to need over the next few days, over $10,000.
With no guarantee that he would even be fully fixed.
Right. Whereas the first case scenario was, we don't see any reason why he can't make a full recovery. Now it was, he's going to need this care. He's going to need to be hospitalized for 4 or 5 days. They're going to need to be going in there and sucking the stuff out of his inside of his stomach, pumping it out for a number of days, and ultimately we don't know if he's going to make it. And that was just hearing the 10,000. I mean, I'm not going to say that we're not here to say whether it's a good decision to not spend any money or to spend money until there's nothing else to do. The point of the video is not that at all, because it's unique to every situation. But for us, we just couldn't fathom the idea of spending. For us, it was a very real number. $10,000 was not just, oh, we're just going to go into debt. We're already in debt $4,000. That we love the dog. We're going to just spend whatever it takes, because they don't see the connection between the money, the decisions they're making, and the money that's being spent. So I remember just being
my stomach is in knots just thinking about it now and reliving that whole scenario. My whole body was shaking, and I just knew in my gut, that there was no way that we could do that. But at the same time, I just had the hardest time coming to terms with that idea. I told you that I felt like a monster, because how do you make that kind of decision? It's so unfair. But I just knew in my gut that we couldn't pursue that.
Yeah, and so we ultimately gave him a call back, because we obviously needed some time to talk about it, and we made the decision to put Rusty down, which was tough, and we're still still trying to get over it to this day. But we made that decision, and I think that was the hard part, was knowing that we had the cash. We made the initial investment because we really wanted to, but knowing that we had put Rusty down and we were still out $3,500, which is what the total ended up being. And I think that ultimately what we wanted to just kind of come away with was, emergencies are always going to happen in this life. Accidents happen, bones get broken, people fall. There are always going to be things that come up in life that are going to cost money. And while we don't have any control over when those things happen or what happens, we do have the ability to prepare for the future and to, as much as possible, have cash set aside to deal with those emergencies as best as possible. And I think what the big benefit was giving us clarity. We had the connection between the decisions we were making and the fact that we were actually spending real money. Whether you, like I said, in our place would have decided to not spend any money at all, or to have spent as much money as possible until there was literally nothing else that could be done. Let's see.
That's your own judgment call to
Right.
make.
Yeah, and so plan for us moving forward is to, we haven't made any decisions about a dog, but I think that, I'm not sure how much time we can make it with our household, not having a dog at some point in the future.
There's definitely a void that needs to be filled eventually. So we definitely miss Rusty so much. He was such a special dog. He was our gentle giant. And yeah, I have this little pillow. Reminds me of him.
I remember him by.
Yep, when he was a little puppy.
Yeah, I think that, so our goal, that leads me to, our goal obviously in 2019 is to build up our emergency fund. And I think this brings up another thing that my wife and I, we make decisions together about money. And this is one of the ways that we balance each other out. Was my initial thought was, okay, we've got to really buckle down, and we've got to get that emergency fund back to 100%, which is definitely my mentality when it comes to money, is having just that drive on rebuilding that and
wanting to rebuild it immediately,
ASAP,
which meant lots of extra hours and long nights of more work because someone's got to work and someone's got to watch the 4 children.
Right, and so what was really great about this was having that balanced mentality was, hey, yes, you were on the same page. We want to rebuild our emergency fund, but not at the expense of everything else we want to accomplish their other priorities as well. So that's one of the great ways that you can work with your spouse if you're married, and making sure that you're making these decisions together and bringing balance. Yeah, I think that's all we wanted to talk about. Just kind of give you a little bit of transparency. I truly am the average Joe, right? Just like you guys, we make real money decisions on a daily basis, on a monthly basis. We manage a budget, and having an emergency fund sometimes, after a while of not using it, it kind of hurts a little bit to finally dip into it, but that is what it's there for. It's there as a safeguard to prevent us from going into debt and kind of getting back to that life of living paycheck to paycheck and being stressed out about money. The decision wasn't stress-free, right? We still had emotional stress that came about, but the money aspect of it, while something that was there for us to consider, was not a matter of us having a bunch of debt now and having to deal with that. So yeah, thanks for tuning in if you're going to watch in the future. But if having reducing financial stress in your life and building strong money habits is something that's important to you, and how is it not, make sure and hit the subscribe button below. And if you found some value out of this video and the transparency that we gave, hit that like button as well. Thanks so much.
Good night.
How do I end this?